Today we'll be starting with chapter 6 today. Motivation is overrated. Environment often matters more. Anne Thorndike, a primary care physician at Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston, had a great crazy idea. She believed she could improve the eating habits of thousands of hospital staff and visitors without changing their willpower or motivation in the slightest way. In fact, she didn't plan on talking to them at all. Thorndike and her colleagues designed a 6-month study to alter the choice architecture of the hospital cafeteria. They started by changing how drinks were arranged in the room. Originally, the refrigerators located next to the cash registers in the cafeteria were filled with only soda. The researchers added water as an option to each one. Additionally, they placed baskets of bottled water next to the food stations throughout the room. Soda was still in the primary refrigerators, but water was now available at all drink locations. Over the next 3 months, the number of soda sales at the hospital dropped by 11.4%. Meanwhile, sales of bottled water increased by 25.8%. They made similar adjustments and saw similar results with the food in the cafeteria. Nobody had said a word to anyone eating there. The following figure shows the before and after. Here is a representation of what the cafeteria looked like before the environment design changes were made, which is on the left side, and after on the right side. The shaded boxes indicate areas where bottled water was available in each instance. Because the amount of water in the environment was increased, behavior shifted naturally and without additional motivation. People often choose products not because of what they are, but because of where they are. If I walk into the kitchen and see a plate full of cookies on the counter, I'll pick up half a dozen and start eating, even if I hadn't been thinking about them beforehand and didn't necessarily feel hungry. If the communal table at the office is always filled with donuts and bagels, it's going to be hard not to grab one every now and then. Your habits change depending on the room you are in and the cues in front of you. Environment is the invisible hand that shapes human behavior. Despite our unique personalities, certain behaviors tend to arise again and again under certain environmental conditions. In church, people tend to talk in whispers. On a dark street, people act wary and guarded. In this way, the most common form of change is not internal, but external. We are changed by the world around us. Every habit is context dependent. In 1936, psychologist Kurt Lewin wrote a simple equation that makes a powerful statement. Behavior is a function of the person in their environment, or B is equal to F of P and E. It didn't take long for Lewin's equation to be tested in business. In 1952, the economist Hawkins Stern described a phenomenon he called suggestion impulse buying, which is triggered when a shopper sees a product for the first time and visualizes a need for it. In other words, customers will occasionally buy products not because they want them, but because of how they are presented to them. For example, Items at eye level tend to be purchased more than those down near the floor. For this reason, you will find expensive brand names featured in easy to reach locations on store shelves because they drive the most profit, while cheaper alternatives are tucked away in harder to reach spots. The same goes for end caps, which are the units at the end of the aisles. End caps are money making machines for retailers because they are obvious locations that encounter a lot of foot traffic. For example, 45% of Coca-Cola sales comes specifically from end of the aisle racks. The more obviously available a product or service is, the more likely you are to try it. People drink Bud Light because it is in every bar and visit Starbucks because it is on every corner. We like to think that we are in control. If we choose water over soda, we assume it is because we wanted to do so. The truth, however, is that many of the actions we take each day are shaped not by purposeful drive and choice, but by the most obvious option. Every living being has its own methods for sensing and understanding the world. Eagles have remarkable long distance vision. Snakes can smell by tasting the air with their highly sensitive tongues. Sharks can detect small amounts of electricity and vibrations in the water caused by nearby fish. Even bacteria have chemoreceptors, tiny sensory cells that allow them to detect toxic chemicals in their environment. In humans, perception is directed by the sensory nervous system. We perceive the world through sight, sound, smell, touch, and taste. But we also have other ways of sensing stimuli. Some are conscious, but many are non conscious. For instance, you can notice when the temperature drops before a storm, or when the pain in your gut rises during a stomachache, or when you fall off balance while walking on rocky ground. Receptors in your body pick up on a wide range of internal stimuli, such as the amount of salt in your blood or the need to drink when thirsty. The most powerful of all human sensory abilities, however, is vision. The human body has about 11 million sensory receptors. Approximately 10 million of those are dedicated to sight. Some experts estimate that half of the brain's resources are used on vision. Given that we are more dependent on vision than on any other sense, it should come as no surprise that visual clues are the greatest catalyst of our behavior. For this reason, a small change in what you see can lead to a big shift in what you do. As a result, you can imagine how important it is to live and work in environments that are filled with productive cues and devoid of unproductive ones. Thankfully, there is good news in this respect. You don't have to be the victim of your environment. You can also be the architect of it. How to design your environment for success. During the energy crisis and oil embargo of the 1970s, Dutch researchers began to pay close attention to the country's energy usage. In one suburb near Amsterdam, they found that some homeowners used 30% less energy than their neighbors, despite the homes being of similar size and getting electricity for the same price. It turned out the houses in this neighborhood were nearly identical, except for one feature: the location of the electrical meter. Some had one in the basement. Others had the electrical meter upstairs in the main hallway. As you may guess, the homes with the meters located in the main hallway used less electricity. When their energy use was obvious and easy to track, people changed their behavior. Every habit is initiated by a cue, and we are more likely to notice cues that stand out. Unfortunately, the environments where we live and work often make it easy not to do certain actions because there is no obvious cue to trigger the behavior. It's not it's easy not to practice the guitar when it's tucked away in the closet. It's easy not to read a book when the bookshelf is in the corner of the guest room. It's easy not to take your vitamins when they are out of sight in the pantry. When the cues that spark a habit are subtle or hidden, they are easy to ignore. By comparison, creating obvious visual cues can draw your attention toward a desired habit. In the early 1990s, a cleaning staff at Schiphol Airport in Amsterdam installed a small sticker that looked like a fly near the center of each urinal. Apparently, when men stepped up to the urinals, they aimed for what they thought was a bug. The stickers improved their aim and significantly reduced spillage around the urinals. Further analysis determined that the stickers cut bathroom cleaning costs by 8% per year. I've experienced the power of obvious cues in my own life. I used to buy apples from the store, put them in the crisper in the bottom of the refrigerator, and forget all about them. By the time I remembered, the apples would have gone bad. I never saw them, so I never ate them. Eventually, I took my own advice and redesigned my environment. I bought a large display bowl and placed it in the middle of the kitchen counter. The next time I bought apples, that was where they went, out in the open where I could see them. Almost like magic, I began eating a few apples each day simply because they were obvious rather than out of sight. Here are a few ways you can redesign your environment and make the cues for your preferred habits more obvious. If you want to remember to take your medication each night, put your pill bottle directly next to the faucet on the bathroom counter. If you want to practice guitar more frequently, place your guitar stand in the middle of the living room. If you want to remember to send more thank you notes, keep a stack of stationery on your desk. If you want to drink more water, fill up a few water bottles each morning and place them in common locations around the house. If you want to make a habit a big part of your life, make the cue a big part of your environment. The most persistent behaviors usually have multiple cues. Consider how many different ways a smoker could be prompted to pull out a cigarette. Driving in the car, seeing a friend smoke, feeling stressed at work, and so on. The same strategy can be employed for good habits. By sprinkling triggers throughout your surroundings, you increase the odds that you'll think about your habit throughout the day. Make sure the best choice is the most obvious one. Making a better decision is easy and natural when the cues for good habits are right in front of you. Environment design is powerful not only because it influences how we engage with the world, but also because we rarely do it. Most people live in a world others have created for them, but you can alter the spaces where you live and work to increase your exposure to positive cues and reduce your exposure to negative ones. Environment design allows you to take back control and become the architect of your life. Be the designer of your world and not merely the consumer of it. The context is the cue. The cues that trigger a habit can start out very specific, but over time, your habits become associated not with a single trigger, but with the entire context surrounding the behavior. For example, many people drink more in social situations than they would ever drink alone. The trigger is rarely a single cue, but rather the whole situation. Watching your friends order drinks, hearing the music at the bar, seeing the beers on tap, we mentally assign our habits to the locations in which they occur: the home, the office, the gym. Each location develops a connection to certain habits and routines. You establish a particular relationship with the objects on your desk, the items on your kitchen counter, the things in your bedroom. Our behavior is not defined by the objects in the environment, but by our relationship to them. In fact, this is a useful way to think about the influence of the environment on your behavior. Stop thinking about your environment as filled with objects. Start thinking about it as filled with relationships. Think in terms of how you interact with the spaces around you. For one person, her couch is the place where she reads for an hour every night. For someone else, the couch is where he watches television and eats a bowl of ice cream after work. Different people can have different memories and thus different habits associated with the same place. The good news, you can train yourself to link a particular habit with a particular context. In one study, scientists instructed insomniacs to get into bed only when they were tired. If they couldn't fall asleep, they were told to sit in a different room until they became sleepy. Over time, subjects began to associate the context of their bed with the action of sleeping, and it became easier to quickly fall asleep when they climbed in bed. Their brains learned that sleeping, not browsing on their phones, not watching television, not staring at the clock, was the only action that happened in that room. The power of context also reveals an important strategy. Habits can be easier to change in a new environment. It helps to escape the subtle triggers and cues that nudge you toward your current habits. Go to a new place, a different coffee shop, a bench in the park, a corner of your room you seldom use, and create a new routine there. It is easier to associate a new habit with a new context than to build a new habit in the face of competing cues. It can be difficult to go to bed early if you watch television in your bedroom each night. It can be hard to study in the living room without getting distracted if that's where you always play video games. But when you step outside your normal environment, you leave your behavioral biases behind. You aren't battling old environmental cues, which allows new habits to form without interruption. Want to think more creatively? Move to a bigger room, a rooftop patio, or a building with expansive architecture. Take a break from the space where you do your daily work, which is also linked to your current thought patterns. Trying to eat healthier? It is likely that you shop on autopilot at your regular supermarket. Try a new grocery store. You may find it easier to avoid unhealthy food when your brain doesn't automatically know where it is located in the store. When you can't manage to get to an entirely new environment, redefine or rearrange your current one. Create a separate space for work, study, exercise, entertainment, and cooking. The mantra I find useful is one space, one use. When I started my career as an entrepreneur, I would often work from my couch or at the kitchen table. In the evenings, I found it very difficult to stop working. There was no clear division between the end of work time and the beginning of personal time. Was the kitchen table my office or the space where I ate meals? Was the couch where I relaxed or where I sent emails? Everything happened in the same place. A few years later, I could finally afford to move to a home with a separate room for my office. Suddenly, work was something that happened in here, and personal life was something that happened out there. It was easier for me to turn off the professional side of my brain when there was a clear dividing line between work life and home life. Each room had one primary use. The kitchen was for cooking, the office was for working. Whenever possible, avoid mixing the context of one habit with another. When you start mixing contexts, you'll start mixing habits, and the easier ones will usually win out. This is one reason why the versatility of modern technology is both a strength and a weakness. You can use your phone for all sorts of tasks, which makes it a powerful device. But when you use your phone to do nearly anything, it becomes hard to associate it with one task. You want to be productive, but you're also conditioned to browse social media, check email, and play video games whenever you open your phone. It's a mishmash of cues. You may be thinking, you don't understand. I live in New York City. My apartment is the size of a smartphone. I need each room to play multiple roles. Fair enough. If your space is limited, divide your room into activity zones: a chair for reading, a desk for writing, a table for eating. You can do the same with your digital spaces. I know a writer who uses his computer only for writing, his tablet only for reading, and his phone only for social media and texting. Every habit should have a home. If you can manage to stick with this strategy, each context will become associated with a particular habit and mode of thought. Habits thrive under predictable circumstances like these. Focus comes automatically when you are sitting at your work desk. Relaxation is easier when you are in a space designed for that purpose. Sleep comes quickly when it is the only thing that happens in your bedroom. If you want behaviors that are stable and predictable, you need an environment that is stable and predictable. A stable environment where everything has a place and a purpose is an environment where habits can easily form. Chapter summary. Small changes in context can lead to large changes in behavior over time. Every habit is initiated by a cue. We are more likely to notice cues that stand out. Make the cues of good habits obvious in your environment. Gradually, your habits become associated not with a single trigger, but with the entire context surrounding the behavior. The context becomes the cue. It is easier to build new habits in a new environment because you are not fighting against old cues. Before we proceed to chapter 7, does anyone have any doubts or any questions related to chapter 6? Any point or any concept that you haven't understood, you can unmute yourselves and ask. Taranjit, you've unmuted yourself. Would you like to ask something?
No, it is
Okay.
very clear. It's very
Okay.
clear.
All right.
Like we have been following this, like since times unknown. Whatever is there visible to you, like the example of
Correct.
apples.
Correct.
I do that. Like whatever I want my children to eat, I keep it on the dining table. So whenever
Okay.
they are passing through, they pick up one piece.
Pick it up. Absolutely.
So that is always an easier way.
Yes. And also, I think associating a particular area or a particular room with one particular task. So I think during COVID times, a lot of us had this problem where everybody was working from home. There was no designated office space or study space. So it was very difficult to switch off from, work mode or office mode and come into relaxation, because the same room where you would watch TV or rest was also your workspace. So, according to this, if you have just one particular place where you do one activity, it's much easier to follow through on your habits.
Yes.
All right, we'll continue with chapter 7, and at the end of the session, then we can pause and discuss further. Chapter 7, The Secret to Self-Control. In 1971, as the Vietnam War was heading into its 16th year, Congressman Robert Steele from Connecticut and Morgan Murphy from Illinois made a discovery that stunned the American public. While visiting the troops, they had learned that over 15% of US soldiers stationed there were heroin addicts. Follow-up research revealed that 35% of service members in Vietnam had tried heroin, and as many as 20% were addicted. The problem was even worse than they had initially thought. The discovery led to a flurry of activity in Washington, including the creation of the Special Action Office of Drug Abuse Prevention under President Nixon to promote prevention and rehabilitation and to track addicted service members when they returned home. Lee Robbins was one of the researchers in charge. In a finding that completely upended the accepted beliefs about addiction, Robbins found that when soldiers who had been heroin users returned home, only 5% of them became re addicted within a year, and just 12% relapsed within 3 years. In other words, approximately 9 out of 10 soldiers who used heroin in Vietnam eliminated their addiction nearly overnight. This finding contradicted the prevailing view at the time, which considered heroin addiction to be a permanent and irreversible condition. Instead, Robbins revealed that addictions could spontaneously dissolve if there was a radical change in the environment. In Vietnam, soldiers spent all day surrounded by cues triggering heroin use. It was easy to access. They were engulfed by the constant stresses of war. They built friendships with fellow soldiers who were also heroin users, and they were thousands of miles from home. Once a soldier returned to the United States, though he found himself in an environment devoid of those triggers. When the context changed, so did the habit. Compare this situation to that of a typical drug user. Someone becomes addicted at home or with friends, goes to a clinic to get clean, which is devoid of all the environmental stimuli that prompt their habit, then returns to their old neighborhood with all of their previous cues that caused them to get addicted in the first place. It's no wonder that usually you see numbers that are the exact opposite of those in the Vietnam study. Typically, 90% of heroin users become re addicted once they return home from rehab. The Vietnam studies ran counter to many of our cultural beliefs about bad habits because it challenged the conventional association of unhealthy behavior as a moral weakness. If you're overweight, a smoker, or an addict, you've been told your entire life that it is because you lack self control. Maybe even that you're a bad person. The idea that a little bit of discipline would solve all our problems is deeply embedded in our culture. Recent research, however, shows something different. When scientists analyze people who appear to have tremendous self control, it turns out those individuals aren't all that different from those who are struggling. Instead, disciplined people are better at structuring their lives in a way that does not require heroic willpower and self control. In other words, they spend less time in tempting situations. The people with the best self control are typically the ones who need to use it the least. It's easier to practice self restraint when you don't have to use it very often. So, yes, perseverance, grit, and willpower are essential to success. But the way to improve these qualities is not by wishing you were a more disciplined person, but by creating a more disciplined environment. This counterintuitive idea makes even more sense once you understand what happens when a habit is formed in the brain. A habit that has been encoded in the mind is ready to be used whenever the relevant situation arises. When Patty Allwell, a therapist from Austin, Texas, started smoking, she would often light up while riding horses with a friend. Eventually, she quit smoking and avoided it for years. She also stopped riding. Decades later, she hopped on a horse again and found herself craving a cigarette for the first time in forever. The cues were still internalized. She just hadn't been exposed to them in a long time. Once a habit has been encoded, the urge to act follows whenever the environmental cues reappear. This is one reason behavior change techniques can backfire. Shaming obese people with weight loss presentations can make them feel stressed, and as a result, many people return to their favorite coping strategy, overeating. Showing pictures of blackened lungs to smokers leads to higher levels of anxiety, which drives many people to reach for a cigarette. If you're not careful about cues, you can cause the very behavior you want to stop. Bad habits are autocatalytic. The process feeds itself. They foster the feelings they try to numb. You feel bad, so you eat junk food. Because you eat junk food, you feel bad. Watching television makes you feel sluggish, so you watch more television because you don't have the energy to do anything else. Worrying about your health makes you feel anxious, which causes you to smoke to ease your anxiety, which makes your health even worse, and soon you're feeling more anxious. It's a downward spiral, a runaway train of bad habits. Researchers refer to this phenomenon as cue induced wanting. An external trigger causes a compulsive craving to repeat a bad habit. Once you notice something, you begin to want it. This process is happening all the time, often without us realizing it. Scientists have found that showing addicts a picture of cocaine for just 33 milliseconds stimulates the reward pathway in the brain and sparks desire. This speed is too fast for the brain to consciously register. The addicts couldn't even tell you what they had seen, but they craved the drug all the same. Here's the punchline: you can break a habit, but you're unlikely to forget it. Once the mental grooves of habit have been carved into your brain, they are nearly impossible to remove entirely, even if they go unused for quite a while. And that means that simply resisting temptation is an ineffective strategy. It is hard to maintain a Zen attitude in a life filled with interruptions. It takes too much energy. In the short run, you can choose to overpower temptation. In the long run, we become a product of the environment that we live in. To put it bluntly, I have never seen someone consistently stick to positive habits in a negative environment. A more reliable approach is to cut bad habits off at the source. One of the most practical ways to eliminate a bad habit is to reduce exposure to the cue that causes it. If you can't seem to get any work done, leave your phone in another room for a few hours. If you're continually feeling like you're not enough, stop following social media accounts that trigger jealousy and envy. If you're wasting too much time watching television, move the TV out of the bedroom. If you're spending too much money on electronics, quit reading reviews of the latest tech gear. If you're playing too many video games, unplug the console and put it in a closet after each use. This practice is an inversion of the first law of behavior change. Rather than make it obvious, you can make it invisible. I'm often surprised by how effective simple changes like these can be. Remove a single cue, and the entire habit often fades away. Self control is a short term strategy, not a long term one. You may be able to resist temptation once or twice, but it's unlikely you can muster the willpower to override your desires every time. Instead of summoning a new dose of willpower, whenever you want to do the right thing, your energy would be better spent optimizing your environment. This is the secret to self control. Make the cues of your good habits obvious and the cues of your bad habits invisible. Chapter summary. The inversion of the first law of behavior change is make it invisible. Once a habit is formed, it is unlikely to be forgotten. People with high self control tend to spend less time in tempting situations. It's easier to avoid temptation than resist it. One of the most practical ways to eliminate a bad habit is to reduce exposure to the cue that causes it. Self control is a short term strategy, not a long term one. So that brings us to the end of the first law. We will begin with the second law in tomorrow's session. So for now, I'd like you all to unmute yourself and we can just discuss what we've read in chapter 6 and 7. So this mostly dealt with our environment and how much of a difference our environment makes on our the decisions that we take and the habits that we create. Has anybody had this experience of their environment influencing their habits in a positive or a negative way? You can unmute yourself and answer. Or if there's anything else that you'd like to share, any takeaway from chapter 6 and 7. Chandrasekhar, would you like to start?
Yes, ma'am. This you said in last chapter, one point. Once a habit is formed, it is unlike to be forgotten.
Yes.
We have we Monday to we have for Friday continuously like 10 to 11 classes now, ma'am.
Yes.
As usual, Saturday also remember we have class.
Yes.
One,
You just become used to doing it.
Yeah, because my mind reminded that time. Oh, today, oh, then I remember. No, today
Oh, it's
holidays.
Saturday.
That's when
But that's a
formation.
great habit. So even if you don't read this book with us, hopefully the whole point of this is that 10 to 11 you pick up any book that you're interested in and make it a habit of reading a little bit, every day, even on Saturday, Sunday when we don't have group sessions.
Yes, ma'am. And another point I would like to share here. Yes, ma'am. Here you said like you feel bad, so you eat junk food because you eat junk food, you feel bad.
Correct.
Yes,
So it's
ma'am.
almost
Sometimes
like a cycle. Like we do something, even when we don't want to do it, we end up doing it, and then we feel worse after we've done it.
yes, ma'am. I experienced this one also.
Okay. So what have you tried any steps that to break away from that habit? How do you stop yourself from maybe eating junk food or reduce the amount of junk food that you eat?
Yes, ma'am. That time I experienced. No, next time I remembered. Oh, this time, last time they had feel so bad and some health is not good. Then I never repeat again that one.
Very good.
I remember next time because the
So
health issue is more.
That's more
important.
important.
So I'm never even.
Absolutely. So, like the author also
That's
mentioned, keeping healthy snacks in front. So, if you see the apple, you're more likely to pick up the apple than a bag of chips or something else, which is not so healthy. So, you can start replacing, your unhealthy foods with more healthy foods. Thank you so much. Anything else that you'd like to share?
in
Um,
this in sixth chapter you said like create a separate space for work, study, exercise, entertainment, and in the mantra I find use one space, one use.
okay.
Actually, in we have like my family actually farmers family.
Okay.
We
Okay.
have only one hall. We use everything.
Okay.
Television is
The
only.
same. Yes.
And we sit together, eating together on the same
Okay.
hall, and we shall sleep also in same hall.
Same area. Yes.
uh, because in our native side we have like only one hall and one kitchen. We have
Okay.
don't have enough, so much of rooms also. So we use
Yes.
one hall for everything.
Yes. So I think the author also said that. So if your space is small, in that same room, like you can have one, okay, if the chair is here, then, I will do my studying and reading and writing here. Then the kitchen area can be for cooking and eating together. You can even maybe step outside the house, or, if there's some outdoor space. So try and have, it doesn't have to be a full room, but just a small area somewhere in, in the house or around the house, so that automatically when you come there, your mind thinks that yes, it's time for me to now do this activity. So, if I'm in the kitchen space, then this is the space for cooking or eating meals together. If I'm sitting in this corner, then this is my study area. So every time you come there, automatically you feel that, okay, I should read or I should do a little bit of work over there. So you can try that maybe and see if that helps.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Himja, am I saying your name right? Would you like to share?
Yeah, tell me, ma'am.
Would you like to share anything from what we've read in chapter 6 and 7?
Yeah, ma'am. By reading this, I can understand that I have to avoid the junk foods and make it a self-control, ma'am.
Okay. So,
Only,
any habits or any line that you think that you can follow, maybe something that we read that you think that you can start following now?
yes, ma'am.
Yes?
Yeah,
Okay,
I have
wonderful.
to make a self-control to control to make the healthy food and
Okay,
avoid the conflict.
okay, wonderful. Tanjit, how about you after the end of chapter 7? Anything else that you'd like to share, related to the environment and how the environment affects our habits and
Yes, I definitely 100% agree that the environment affects the habit. Uh, like today, I'm feeling more sleepy because usually I'm sitting in my living room, but my that place I don't use for reading, and my bed I use for
okay.
reading. So I am just drowsy. Yes, I have to go to sleep. I have a habit of reading at least one page before I go to sleep.
Okay.
And
Okay.
this is what it really helps. Like when the example about the things that are displayed at the eye level.
Yes.
I remember whenever you go to mall,
Yes.
so whatever eye level, if a child is going along with you, he will see what the things are there at his eye level. He will try to
Absolutely.
pick up that.
Absolutely.
What we
Yes.
feel, what is at our eye level, because climbing up or going down, stooping down is difficult. So
Correct.
whatever is at your eye level, you pick up that. So
Pick
cues
up.
are
Yes.
always very important. And habit of
Absolutely.
drugs, what you said, that is
Yes.
like I've faced in my family. Like if you put the person in the rehab, one of my uncles was there. So he was fit and fine over there.
Correct.
The moment he used to come back and again that used to start again.
Yes. The
So
environment is the same. The friends,
yes,
they're the
yes,
triggers basically. The
yes,
triggers
yes.
come back when you're in.
Like if I was working with a one juvenile child, so I remember I asked him what, like you are not this way, like you're good and all. So he said, Madam, I did not do, I did this because my friends wanted it, or my friends were doing it.
Yes,
So it happens with that age group, especially from
correct.
say 12, 13 to 18, 19.
Yes,
They don't do it, they just do it mindlessly because the friends are
correct,
doing it, they will also do it. So this
correct.
is very true. That
Yes,
environment plays a very strong,
a
the
big
cues,
role.
yeah, cues also, and the environment plays a very big role in all these.
Absolutely. All right. So I think we'll continue then in tomorrow's session. I hope you all enjoyed today's
Yeah,
2
you have a very
chapters.
sweet voice, Megha.
Thank you. So see you both tomorrow. We'll continue from the second law.
Oh,
Good night.
good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.